It is awesome being in Washington, D.C. with Ilana Dubrovsky and talking about motherhood, food allergy life, and support to countless families, which both Ilana and I have offered in America and in Australia.
So excited to meet you, Nina. It's been a while, we've connected, and now we're actually seeing each other in person. So exciting.
It is so cool that we also met Erin Malaver last night, and we had a great discussion about the future pathways forward in how best to support food allergy families, not just in our respective countries, but globally.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I feel like it was a great brainstorming session for us to think about all of these major issues and gaps in care to try to really bring everybody together and make some change.
When we think about gaps in care, gaps in research, and gaps in support, Ilana, what would you say are the three main things that come to mind?
I think here in the US, we have some gaps in serving safe meals for food allergy children in K-12 schools and higher education. We have another gap where we're missing some connections with allergists connecting to dietitians. A lot of patients don't understand that that's an option here. Oftentimes insurance companies also cover nutrition counseling services. And I would say the third is making sure that people are aware that there are also mental health services around, because food allergy anxiety is very real and it can kind of spiral into different disordered eating patterns and picky eating. And I really want people to know that there are options to support all of these different pillars.
Absolutely. Psychosocial elements of food allergy life are so understudied. Many studies talk about the quality of life. What about our daily life? What about all the lack of services which we have? In Australia, what is probably the most striking for us as first-time, let's say, food allergy parents, is the lack of services at that first point of contact. Either it is at the emergency department when you're just given this possible diagnosis, your child either is or may be allergic to X, Y, and Z, and they just leave you to go home. I'll never forget the first time I took my baby to an ER or ED, and the young doctor on duty said, the literature says there could be a secondary reaction, and just left us go home with a 3-month-old baby, and myself thinking, what does he mean by that? What will actually happen to us? No antihistamines, no adrenaline, go and see a specialist with a 5 to 6 month wait time privately in Australia. So that lack of not just integrated support, even basic one-on-one support at the first level and point of diagnosis is something that we can, I think, address locally and globally.
100%. I mean, I have the chills even hearing you say that. And I feel like anyone listening on who has a food allergy themselves or a child with a food allergy or any clinicians, like those full body chills are very real because we've all been there. In my practice, I work with infants all the way up to adults, and I've seen some adults come to me for various like food allergy, intolerance issues, and some of them haven't even been at the ED for anaphylaxis and left without a referral or without knowing that they have a referral for an allergist and without an EpiPen. And they're kind of like winging it. And me as a food allergy dietitian, I'm like, let's not wing it. Please, let's go to an allergist. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's make sure that we're safe. We've got antihistamines on us. We've got EpiPens. But there's a disconnect.
There's a massive disconnect and massive lack of psychosocial and other types of support. Yeah. When it comes to diet, interestingly, we were referred to dietitians in Australia as part of the public hospital outpatient units, and they made our life much worse. In that case, they told us to avoid everything that was potentially a suspected item that our children could be allergic to, which meant avoiding over 20 food items, not an accurate diagnostic method to determine that in the first place. So we were actually left feeling even more confused and embarked on researching and our own journey to learn about the importance of gut microbiome, skin microbiome, to avoid the triad if possible of asthma, eczema, and food allergies and minimize all the triggers, right, because no one ever mentioned it.
Yeah.
So in terms of Australian services, I think we are quite behind the US in a lot of spaces. I mean, it is amazing that you are a food allergy specialized registered dietitian.
Yeah.
Because in our Australian experience, people who claim to be that tended to know less than we as parents who have to go through countless other appointments to get to that knowledge base, which is not something I would wish for other people, but as a food allergy parent, you question things. And that's quite important.
And to be honest, there's not enough of us out there. I don't know if this is a global issue, but certainly here in the States, there's not a lot of food allergy dietitians who have this experience. We go through our medical training, we get sort of baseline information, but to really have this lived experience, so I have food allergies myself, but I also have 2 children with food allergies, and to have this lived experience is so key to be able to understand where these parents are at, where the children are at, and provide this comprehensive care. I've actually seen dietitians work either way, either full elimination or making recommendations that include their allergens, which I actually personally saw. We saw a dietitian and they had given us a whole treatment plan to make sure that my daughter was getting enough calcium, but it included dairy, which was one of her top allergens. And I was like, all right, well, this is where we lose trust. This is a problem.
This is a massive
It's
problem.
where we lose trust. And like, we were educated enough to know that this was a huge red flag. But then you have the other side where maybe they're not seeing a dietitian, or maybe they're leaving the allergist office with this full list of allergens to avoid. What's left? It's scary.
I love that you mentioned the issue of trust. Food allergy parents naturally don't trust because we had so many unforeseen events happen to us, from accidental exposures in restaurants where you could not trust the chef at the end of the day, or the server, and even doctors themselves. I remember seeing privately one of the allergists, and in the middle of our appointment, it was for milk and dairy allergy, the allergist looks at me and says, "Why don't you try some yogurt?" After we just experienced anaphylaxis from an accidental exposure to the tiniest trace of dairy in baby food. They literally tend to somehow forget that they're talking to a food allergy parent. So we become detectives, almost like trying to deconstruct a crime scene, you know, what happened in each scenario. But I think the potency of us coming together as a global community is to voice the need for change.
100%. I also feel like, and maybe you feel this way too, Nina, about your children, but the kids with food allergies are really intuitive. They're really bright. They're advocates, and they can pick up on cues that are said in the allergist office. So I've had clients who start distrusting medical professionals because they don't feel safe. Or maybe the medical professional, the allergist, is speaking to mom or dad, but the teen or tween is there and is observing this and feeling unheard. And I feel like the children need to be prioritized and be a participant in their own health. Like the amount of conversations I have almost daily with these children to learn how to continue speaking up. And if you don't have a connection with an allergist, find someone who you do connect with, someone who you trust. I mean, again, as a food allergy mom, I keep going back to this because trust is hard. We have seen failures happen in all of these different pillars, with friendships, with families, at restaurants, with schools. Who do we trust?
And that's why we're trying to build a global food allergy community led mostly by food allergy moms. We do welcome all dads and grandparents and carers as well. But when it comes to us as moms, we have to listen to our children. I mean, once we had a terrible accidental exposure in a restaurant where a manager of a restaurant convinced us that the only item they had on the menu, which was dairy-free, was a lemon sorbet. The only item, nothing else on the menu. And unfortunately, that particular lemon sorbet was not a lemon sorbet, it was fully dairy cream, mislabeled item. But in the second, when my daughter started reacting, the manager tried to convince me that my daughter is inventing things. So that's what, goes back to your point of involving children in every single decision making about their food allergy life.
Right.
Because my daughter, before we had this meal, she kept saying, "Mom, let's go to McDonald's," because it's actually in Australia. McDonald's nuggets are actually dairy and egg free, in Australia specifically. And I thought, oh my God, again, junk food. We can, even though we are traveling, there could be a better way, and unfortunately there wasn't. So looking for safe spaces with a child's input is crucial. We never made that mistake again.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even thinking about having children verbalize what they're feeling. One of my clients in my experience had a physician who said that it was in her head when she was going through a food challenge. And it's like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to silence the children? We need that input to be able to guide them on how to manage their reactions, guide them on how to manage anaphylaxis. But if we keep saying like, everything's okay, maybe you're making it up. Sure, stress can mimic signs of anaphylaxis, but we need that educational component.
Absolutely. In our experience in Australia, and I think America is similar, carpets are everywhere. Carpets are in children's classrooms, carpets at the airports, carpets are in hotels, and kids with food allergies often have environmental triggers like molds and dust mites. And carpets are the natural habitat for environmental allergens. And how many times did I have to send an email to my school saying, are you cleaning this regularly? I see so much cross-contamination on that floor on a Monday morning, which it shouldn't be. Right. Monday morning should be, clean classroom. How about we advocate for the removal perhaps of carpets and even installation of filters in our school? And the only answer I got at that time is, our air quality is sufficient. Again, the lack of understanding and knowledge how air purifiers can actually assist, can minimize environmental allergy triggers for all of us, not just for food allergy children, but for, more than 2 million Australians have environmental allergies alone.
Right.
And more than 1 million food allergies. So I think helping our environment become cleaner is almost a mission in itself.
Yeah, that actually prompts me to wonder, here in the US, we have food allergies are considered a disability. So it's covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And as such, we're able to advocate for 504 plans, which are accommodations that are actually legally binding with schools. Does Australia have anything like that?
Some states in Australia, I think 1 or 2 have something like that, but not really. It's not universally applied, and it's not universally translated into laws and regulations. It is a hidden disability.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, in Italy actually, Italian citizens can get financial assistance to buy gluten-free food.
Oh, wow.
The country of pasta had made such an accommodation.
That's amazing.
So I think there is so much advocacy work which we need to do as a global community and in our local communities as well to help our children live a safer life, but also all other children around as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's next in your field in America?
We just attended the Food Allergy Research and Education Summit in DC, which was amazing. And so I
wish I was there.
Yeah, I know. So I left feeling, and I said this to everybody that I had met, like I felt like I was wrapped in a warm hug of love. Like there were so many families, so many children there.
So it was a family-friendly event?
Yeah, family-friendly. It fell on Halloween, which is a huge holiday here in the U.S. So the kids dressed up, a lot of the families dressed up. It was great. So the children are invited. And in fact, they actually had a teen track once again. So the kids separated from the adults and were able to do different learning sessions.
Amazing.
And they started doing some interactive sessions and role-playing for the kids. This is really funny, but my daughter was outside of one of the rooms and I was like, what are you doing? You're supposed to get back inside, because the parents weren't allowed. And she goes, they're talking about saliva. I was like, she's 10.
She's really grossed out.
Yeah. But they did a wonderful job. But I left feeling like this itch to continue advocating. So much of my work and my practice is on nutrition counseling for the infants, for the teens, for the adults, which is wonderful. and definitely needed. And it's a big hole. My practice is expanding. But this advocacy piece is there's a lot of disconnects. And so I feel like we need to do more, especially as we think about the schools. I think that that's one of the biggest gaps that I'm seeing for food allergy families, is like navigating life transitions to daycare, then to K-12 or preschool, then to college. And it's, especially the transition to college, it's a terrifying time for families. So one of the areas I see a lot with my clients are life transitions, transitioning to daycares, transitioning to preschool, K-12, and then college. College is a terrifying time for families and for kids to really own their allergies and advocate for themselves and really feel confident and comfortable enough when something goes wrong to speak up. But a lot of things are going wrong in the food service industry, at colleges, and in the K-12 sector. And so there's a lot of work to be done, Nina.
We recently had an amazing inaugural Allergy and Microbiome Gut Health Summit in Sydney. There were 4 speakers. I was one of them, Dr. Jones, Emma Sutherland, Sharon Selby, and we discussed a lot the importance of microbiome and nutrition. The whole summit was around allergies and nutrition, the importance of the gut and skin microbiome. And the feedback was phenomenal. It was extremely successful in terms of participation of the audience, but they wanted more. They were hungry for more information and how they can get involved. So I think if we build this momentum locally and globally, we need to shift the narrative. And if we don't do it, as food allergy parents who are invested in this field in every sense, but emotionally most of all, nobody else will do it for us.
Right.
I love the fact that you mentioned giving voice to children, because kids are often silenced, kids are often pushed aside. The perspective is not really included in decision making at the school level, which is interesting. Like at the university level or colleges, there are student councils, but not at the sort of underage level.
Right.
How could we perhaps increase that participation? What are some of your thoughts?
I mean, I think having a child be involved, at least here in the US, for the 504 plan meetings, typically the children aren't involved. It's generally just the parents, but I think that it's important to get them to hear some of the advocacy language that we as parents are using. I said to my daughter when we returned from fair, I was like, we should go to the school board and have a meeting. And she's really shy, oddly, which I'm going to still work on. But, you know, the schools need to hear the voices from the children. They need to hear it.
Those are their constituents when you think about it.
Exactly. And they need to understand it from their perspective on what the children are experiencing. If there's a level of fear, if there's isolation, restriction, if they're like sitting alone at their own table, how does that make them feel? What can the district do to make it more inclusive? So I think the children need to be encouraged to engage in some of these conversations and not be afraid to go to the nurse's office. Here, usually we have a nurse almost in every school, not always, but they need to be able to feel free to go. And so my daughter has asthma in addition to food allergies, and she was going regularly as soon as she started in kindergarten. And the school was like, well, maybe she shouldn't be coming as often. We want her in the classroom. And I said, no, if she feels like something is wrong, I'm telling her to go. She has to go. Totally. Even if it's like a false alarm, I'd rather her speak up. 100%. And so starting it early on, having them a part of the conversations, trying to get them a part of the conversations with the doctors too, so that they feel comfortable, and especially if there's an emergency, they can speak up. Super important.
Absolutely. School camps are another source of worry for food allergy families. In Australia, it's often in a very remote location. With no ambulance services, perhaps a helicopter is the only way that you can get out if something was to happen. And we all know with anaphylaxis, you often don't have any time, let alone waiting for a helicopter or evacuation team. So in Australia, I think we have so much work to do, precisely because there are actually no specialists in remote Australia. At best, you will have a nurse practitioner or a GP, and there are thousands and thousands of kilometers. So school camps is an area where food allergy parents in Australia are actually quite involved in, and there are lots of sort of there's a lot of information sharing and tips how to approach that whole conversation. You know, the mothers pre-make all different foods and send it with some extra treats for other children. So inclusion is important. But for me, was the big issue was also bullying. I didn't actually know at all that my child was bullied at school because of her food allergies specifically. And about halfway through our OIT program, I was making a video, innocent video, you know, tell us about your progress. How do you feel now being on real milk after, you know, 6 to 8 months in this program? Still not there, but, you know, halfway through. And then she had this revelation about being teased every single day by a group of boys about her food allergies specifically. And I did not know about that. It never came up before.
It breaks my
then
heart.
Addressing the bullying with school was also a challenge, because the school firstly said, well, it's not bullying, it's unkind behavior. I said, well, no, my child is being systematically called this and that because of her food allergies, put down every single day for the past couple of years, which we never knew, because of her food allergies, again, specifically. So kind of almost fighting back with the school without being an overbearing parent, but actually saying why this is a problem. So it's almost like educating school to call out bullying for what it is, not just labeling it as, you know, quarrels amongst kids and moving on, because it didn't move on in my daughter's head. It just came out at the moment that when she felt safe. There is a lot of work to be done in this space. 80% of children are bullied at school, and later on colleges and workplaces as well, as a result of their food allergies. Exclusion at birthday parties, you know, with party bags. You're always being singled out. You're always different. And I think as a community of parents as well, we have a task to make not just Halloween teal, but birthday party bags also teal and safe for all children, not just those who can eat what's being given in those food bags, which is usually junk food anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my heart breaks for all the children that are bullied. And they did a teen track on bullying at the fair conference, which was beautiful. And I hope that there was some, again, the parents weren't included and my daughter didn't share very much, but I hope the kids walked away from that with some strategies on how to speak up, how to not let it go. Both of my children, unfortunately, also experienced that. My son has a sesame allergy, and a child waved their sesame bread in his face. And actually, he did go to the school nurse because he was afraid, and the school nurse pulled the other child in and did some education, which I thought was great. My daughter was told that she was excluded from birthday parties because of her food allergies, which she held on to for years before saying something. So these kids really internalize, but I think it's important for the greater community, non-food allergy parents, to really understand what's happening because they don't get it. And oftentimes the kids are learning from their parents how to respond. And so we need to change the narrative, not only for the food allergy community, but the non-food allergy community, and to get them involved, have them understand how to navigate these conversations, because it's just so hard for us.
In one of the strategies which we had as a family is making every single birthday allergy safe for all. So if there were other peers with food allergies or gluten intolerances or even wheat allergy, depends on what it was, to have every single item at our birthday parties safe for everybody in the room. And we would invite at least 80 people, sort of both classes and the parents, and educate by leading through an example setting and talking about it. I think mentioning, constantly reiterating helps, because initially others are actually may feel afraid to invite your child not to take that responsibility. So exclusion happens often out of their own fear what to do with your child.
Absolutely.
So how do we navigate parental emotions on the other side? How to help them include us and our children easier. I mean, that there isn't much done, I think, in that space, actually, specifically at the moment.
I agree. When my daughter got on Xolair and she was able to successfully introduce her allergens into her diet, and she's not eating her allergens at school because I still want some control and protection, but when her friends would come over and she'd eat her allergens, it was so moving to see her friends be like, no, Mia, you can't have that. What are you doing? Take that out of your mouth. Like, they were so protective and looking out for her, and it like, oh, it makes me emotional even to replay that, because they're so little, you know? And for them to like stand up for each other, like, we need more of that.
Similarly, when my daughter finished OIT, and it took 18 months and, you know, a bit of school exclusion in terms of time, but 18 months later, she was and is able to eat milk and egg daily as part of her maintenance protocol. Her friends could not understand initially. You know, for 10 years, you know, we had 15 hospitalizations with adrenaline, constantly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reactions. She was not only contact reactive, she would react airborne as well if it was in close proximity. And suddenly she was able to travel and eat a cake if she wanted to. I think the most important thing is not to force children to do anything they don't want, because they will develop aversion or resentment towards the person pushing them to do that as well. I wanted to ask you about ARFID, because it's a very new area in Australia, but apparently the field has moved on in America. What is ARFID for some of our listeners and viewers, and how can parents address that?
Yeah, ARFID is still largely not totally understood. And so it's avoidant restrictive. So it's sort of like picky eating with clinical criteria that often goes underdiagnosed. And so typically the children are underweight, or adults, it's not just a pediatric condition, but they're underweight, and think about it as like excessive picky eating. So it could be sensory, it could be psychological, there's lots of different reasons that it can happen. But it's not just, like, in my experience, I'm not only concerned about ARFID with my food allergy clients and beyond, but the picky eating that is stemming kind of from food fears and feeling unsafe with their foods, and maybe some of that pressure coming in from family and seeing stressful environments and maybe being at restaurants and feeling like food is unsafe. Also, there's the connection with siblings, right? Like seeing my son saw my daughter go into anaphylaxis twice, and I think a lot of his fears are, even though he has allergies, but I think they're stemming from seeing her react, and now he has a complicated relationship with food. So ARFID is tricky. I actually haven't seen any. I have seen a few with an ARFID diagnosis, but I think it's pretty underdiagnosed, and I think a lot of clinicians don't totally understand what it is.
And the psychosocial aspects.
Yes, and what's stemming that, what's feeding it. And eating disorders, because it is a clinical eating disorder, they can layer, and people can move in and out of eating disorders dynamically. Yeah. Think about like a binge restriction cycle, right? Like they just kind of fluctuate. And so it's, you know, I'm lucky to be trained in eating disorders, which does have a crossover with food allergy, just looking at where that's coming from. But it's really difficult managing this population because you don't want them to go from one to the next.
Totally.
So it's a delicate balance.
And the field is progressing in the United States in terms of education of clinicians, first of all.
Absolutely.
In terms of how to diagnose it, Absolutely. Is there a crossover with the psychologists in terms of their assistance, or is it mostly in the domain of nutrition in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of psychologists who work in the eating disorder field. A lot. But not a lot that work in the food allergy field. And then what about the crossover with food allergy and eating disorders? I think those would be mostly the food allergy psychologists, but I feel like this is largely an area that has been underexplored. And it's particularly this like intersection that I am super passionate about, because food allergies can impact the whole person in every way. So yeah, I do, and it's really difficult to find a food allergy psychologist. Also, we have to be licensed in the state here in the US in which we're practicing. So the state borders can be a little bit tricky. I'm licensed in most states across the US. And so finding psychologists in each of those states is a challenge.
Absolutely. I guess in Australia, We also have a state-based systems. We have 5 states and 2 territories. So health is usually in the domain of the state.
Yes.
Even though registration usually is national. So, and there's many subspecialties which are still going through that sort of process, what needs registration, what doesn't in the space of counseling in particular. Like in Australia, a counselor is not a psychologist. A licensed psychologist is a registered psychologist as a specialization, but pretty much many people can be counselors with a special interest in ABC sort of fields. And there is a lot of misinformation in the food allergy space. I mean, how many times do we hear misinformation such as food allergies are caused by being picky eaters, or food allergies are caused by X, Y, and Z, which is scientifically absolutely unsound. And in recent days, we had a lot of kind of social media commentary on this topic. And when you combine fear by the parents, misinformation, the lack of trust, but I would say supportive online communities. I think one of the arguments for Facebook groups in particular and for communities online is they have been sometimes the only outlet where parents would express, either anonymously or under their own names, what they feel and the frustration. But in recent years, there was also that misinformation permeating, especially post-COVID, because everyone sort of moved online during COVID, that massive barrage of misinformation in the food allergy space as well. We're not immune to that. So fighting misinformation, I think, is one of the most important educational goals, not just for us in Australia as food allergy community members, but globally.
Oh, absolutely. And I think social media has been such a blessing because we have so much access to information, but that spread of misinformation, especially on the Facebook groups, because so many, I'm on a lot of them as a food allergy parent, but so many of them are parents sharing photos and saying like, is this an allergy? What do I do? Like, we did a store-bought allergy test and my child is showing up as allergic to 150 foods. What do I do? And everybody's like, take it out of their diet. Right? So like, that's scary. Some of these people don't even have an allergist. And so people are making the some community members would make a recommendation, go to an allergist, get an assessment, but are they? It's very concerning.
Absolutely.
But the misinformation is definitely rampant. I get a lot of calls of folks that don't really know what their allergens are. And they ask, like, should I just do a store-bought test? And I'm like, no. Like, make an appointment with an allergist. Let's do a consult there. Meanwhile, we can start establishing care and going through the history. But yeah, over exclusion is concerning, especially from a nutritional perspective.
And we also know that excluding something you're not allergic to can actually lead to a food allergy.
Yes.
Avoidance is not good for anyone.
Right. I'm really grateful that I have some clients who have little ones that are starting introduction with no allergy history because they're afraid, which is wonderful.
With no allergy
history. And it's, maybe they would be delaying introduction. So best practices between 4 to 6 months, start introducing these allergens into a baby's diet. And so I think there's a real hesitation because food allergies are becoming more prevalent. And I think people are understanding that it is a major global public health concern.
Okay.
And so to have people reach out to say, what do I do? And to guide them through the introductions and see the child successfully be able to tolerate all of it. I'm getting the chills again.
Amazing.
Getting the chills again. But it's a beautiful part of my work is just to see I guess I'll use the word recovery in so many different ways, is feeling good with some supplementation to feel good and starting to get through eating disorder recovery with good care. And also like the psychological aspect is feeling more safe. And so I try to create a very safe space emotionally for all of my clients because it's imperative.
In our program in Australia, we do a lot of education about nutrition. And traditionally, oral immunotherapy or sublingual immunotherapy or any modulation method really, often it never mentions nutrition as the primary basis for gut microbiome to provide basis for any later immune modulation.
Yeah.
And the education that needs to go into that is often met with lots of question marks. Parents not even understanding. I mean, to be honest, I didn't either before I started working in this field, how important it is to have wholesome food in your diet, eliminating inflammatory triggers as much as possible without being excluded as well. It is really hard in the 21st century to meet all these benchmarks, but at the same time, there is no option B.
Right. So one of the main interventions that I usually work with on all of my clients is assessing fiber intake for the microbiome, but also fiber is connected to cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone, which
that is so interesting.
Level of burnout globally is so high. So when we are stressed, we are in a state of fight or flight. So our body doesn't know the difference between, are we afraid because we need to cross the street, or are we afraid because a grizzly bear is chasing us? Our body just doesn't know it. It triggers the same response. And so when cortisol is high, what can help bring that down is a high fiber diet.
That is fascinating. Moms and dads listening, high fiber diet.
Yeah, so, and fiber, it's not complicated. It's whole grains, as long as they're safe, right? Fruits, vegetables, again, as long as they're safe. If there's any oral allergy syndrome, just make sure that they're cooked thoroughly, but you're getting that fiber in there. And oftentimes with a lot of processed foods, we're missing that fiber. And so fiber is incredibly important, not only for the gut microbiome, but hormonal health too. And as women, when our hormones are fluctuating, eat that fiber.
In terms of capsuled fiber versus natural fiber, what would you say?
That's a great question. I prefer natural as much as possible, but what I see a lot of times in my practice is it's difficult to get. So sometimes I'll recommend like a fiber powder that people can put. That's a single ingredient, like a psyllium husk, that helps them reach their goals. But none of my interventions are take a supplement to reach 100% of your goals, right? Even with calcium, which is it's my favorite micronutrient. I'll say supplement a little bit if it's clinically appropriate. The rest we need to get through diet, because the goal is always to get everything through diet. It's impossible to do.
The quantity is necessary.
Yes.
And also, I think being time poor doesn't help either. Like we live outside most of the time. We come home tired. Right. How can we plan better our fiber intake? What do you think?
So, eating consistently. Eating consistently. I explain, so many of my clients don't eat breakfast. And the biggest point of feedback that I hear is it just makes them feel unwell. And I get it, but not getting 3 meals a day at least. And maybe it's like timed differently, but you're missing out on those nutrients. Even think about your protein goals, right? So if you split that number in half for the day, you need to get in a lot of fiber in those 2 meals. But if you split it out over 3 meals a day, it's going to be easier to get it in. And so what I also encourage is try to have a fruit with your snacks, pair macros, have a fruit with a fat, with a protein, because you're going to get that balance of the carb and the other macronutrients. So
like pair with a burger.
Yeah, exactly. But eating consistently, I think, is the biggest thing. And as our society, global society, gets busier, we're skipping meals. The meals aren't a priority. So sometimes it's just like put a timer on your phone to remind yourself to eat. I know it seems very basic, but
timer
it's very important. There we go. Fiber timer.
I think this is the best tip, one of the best tips from today. Timer for fiber.
Yeah.
What about the balance between proteins and carbs? There's so many diets nowadays coming out, do not have carbs or only have fatty meats. What's your take as a clinical nutritionist?
What did carbs do so wrong that people villainize them? Carbs are the foundation of your diet, and they're super important. Now, we're not talking about fries every day. We're talking about complex carbs with that fiber, with those B vitamins, with the nutrients. But carbs are imperative. That's where That's where you're getting your energy. Most of your calories for the day come from carbs. Carbs convert into glucose, which is your brain's preferred energy source. So the clients that I work with, even if like toning or weight loss is a component of one of their goals, which I really don't focus on that much, the intervention is eating more, because most people are underfed. So you're underfed.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So we need carbs at every meal. Maybe the portion looks different. Maybe the portion is small. That's okay. But feeding yourself regularly and having that balance is important. Having protein at every meal, at least the 3. Again, thinking about meeting your protein goals for the day, it's going to be easier for your body to digest and metabolize if you're spreading it out, as opposed to having like a big steak at once.
So 3 times a day, perhaps.
Yeah, steak 3 times a day. That's the takeaway. I'm just kidding. But yes, eating 3 times a day and having those mix of the macros 3 times a day for sure. Protein is really important. I don't know if you see this in Australia, but here in the States, there's a huge emphasis on high protein diets.
Absolutely. Even powders, excessive use of powders actually has been linked with some health issues in Australia.
Correct. So again, the powders have their place as part of a healthy diet, a healthy balanced diet, but it can't be the only source. So having that as a supplement to your regular nutrition protocol is key. But protein at every meal and balance, and it depends on where someone's at and based on their clinical histories. Some people need a little bit more protein, some people need less for certain conditions, but definitely balance and definitely fruits and veggies.
I'm just interested in your practice. Do you see the differences between parental habits and then potential clash of that when it comes to feeding a child?
Oh yeah.
How is that resolved?
So parent diet can impact the children because they're the ones doing the purchasing. So I see children will start to mirror, especially in this like disordered eating disorder world, is the kids are starting, with or without food allergy, are starting to mimic the parents' eating patterns, whether it's skipping meals, not believing in snacks, not believing in carbs, villainizing packaged foods, villainizing sweets.
Carbs.
Yeah, carbs. And so especially as we go into those like preteen and then teen years, there's a lot of negative input, I think, that the kids are seeing. And then you've here got middle schoolers with the teens that have very differing, complicated relationships with foods, and everybody's observing that. So I think the parents need to have a positive relationship with food to model that for their kids. The other thing is, if you're sitting at a dinner table with your children and there's no balance on the table, how are the children going to learn what balance looks like?
I love that.
Right? So we need to model behavior just in anything else, like how we treat others, kindness, use of profanity, whatever it is. We always want to model good behaviors for our children. So the same with diet.
Modeling nutritional good habits.
Yes.
That's a major task, I think, for every single parent, but perhaps it should be talked about more in terms of parenting skills and building parenting skills in this regard.
Yep.
I think this was a great discussion for today.
Agreed.
We're so grateful that you were able to join us. And if you have any questions, please send your comments, ideas, questions, and let's talk about some of these issues more in the future.
100%. Thanks so much, Nina. Always a pleasure.
Amazing pleasure. Thank you. From DC, Ilana and Nina. See you again.
Bye.
Bye.